this changes everything in terms of enterprise software. Everyone's talking about, okay, well, like Salesforce, way overvalued, short the stock. I don't think any of that's happening. But in terms of thinking about how we build software and the fact that a lot of users can build a software that works for them and has just the features that they need and all of the features that they need, that is pretty powerful.
Hello, welcome to Picture Me Coding with Eric Aker and Mike Mall. Mike, how you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Do you want to kick it off today, Mike? Tell us what we're doing.
We have a special guest today. Our guest is Doug Burke, who's been a technology guy in San Diego for a long time and a technology executive for many years. And by an amazing coincidence, also happens to be the husband of our good friend Irina Telyukova, who was our guest on episode 42 a year or so ago. Doug has been messing around with AI like the rest of us nerds, and he's built a pretty cool thing that we're going to talk about today. Do you want to introduce yourself, Doug, and tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah. So Doug Burke, great to reconnect with you guys. Of course, we met through Irina, and I have followed your path. And congratulations on your success of the podcast, approaching episode 100. That's awesome.
Thanks.
So yeah, I'm a serial entrepreneur in technology, primarily enterprise software. I've been a part of 11 companies, 8 of which have been startup companies. Not all of them my companies. Several have been my companies. Almost all of them have been in some form of enterprise software. And this latest company I've been doing, is actually probably the longest company I've ever done, or been a part of. It's called Cognitive Medical Systems. And it is a healthcare IT company primarily focused on the U.S. federal government in the healthcare payer space. So the big either federal government payers like Medicare and Medicaid, or the big insurance companies which support the big federal government programs like United Healthcare and Cigna and TriWest and those guys. And we build software and we integrate software. Big government programs, sort of the typical kind of government contractor. So we'll look to go after RFPs, and then we'll chase those for a long time, and we'll partner or we'll prime, and then we'll perform the RFPs either directly with the government or for one of the prime contractors. So we've been around for 15 years. We've got about 120 employees, and like any sort of government contracting, it goes up and down, and the budget cycles, and the new presidential administrations and all that. So it's been fun. It's been exciting. I am one of the co-founders of the company. My focus is generally sort of everything externally facing, so sales, marketing, business development, strategy. In the last year, I've transitioned from being focused on sales and marketing to being focused more on strategy and sort of where we go in the next 5, maybe 10 years. And as a part of that, my focus in this next year is AI and what we're going to do with AI. And it's been a lot of fun. So more recently, from December through March of this last year, I took a sabbatical, and that gave me a time to catch up on all the home projects and just do things that weren't work related, but also to dive deep into Claude Code and AI, and that's when I started this. I started it a couple of years ago, but that's when I really went deep in getting serious about this thing that I call SAM.
But Doug, you have a pretty technical background yourself, right? Before you started companies, you worked on systems, you wrote software, is that right?
Yes, I wrote software, but not like you guys write software. I had an undergrad in economics and a minor in computer science. So, I grew up in the 80s with, the Commodore VIC-20 and, sort of that kind of stuff. And, took a bunch of programming classes. I never really did it seriously, like for a job or whatever, but I've always managed technology. I have a pretty good understanding of it. And for a while I did system administration, so that was probably the closest to really being technical.
Okay.
But yeah, definitely understand it.
Right on. So you started doing a lot of AI stuff. It sounds like you started with Claude Code. Do you want to tell us about how you got into, what were you looking for? Someone like for us, we think, well, we write a lot of code. We're going to use these tools to write more code. What were you looking for when you started working with these tools?
And actually I started with OpenAI, ChatGPT, like a lot of people whenever it was late 2023 when it came on the scene. I've got one of my best friends, a guy named Pete Dapkus, runs an engineering group at a company called Iterable. He's the software engineer, and he has always pushed me to to not lose my technical edge. So he's the friend that always like, gotta try this, gotta try this, gotta try this. So when LLMs came on the scene, or when OpenAI released ChatGPT, it's like, hey, take a look at ChatGPT, and I'm like, what is an LLM? What is this stuff? So he has always been pushing me to sort of stay on the front of this, and so through 2024, 2025, when LLMs started to come on the scene, and we had Gemini and Perplexity, and the different model companies started to grow up. Two things: one, we needed to do something at Cognitive, my company, because everyone started playing with this stuff, and because we do federal government programs that have to have software, everything with federal government programs, at least DoD and VA, has to be housed in the U.S. on U.S. servers. So it's the AWS GovCloud or the Azure, what they call Government Computing Cloud environments. Because at the time, we couldn't guarantee any of that. Like, everyone's just sort of starting to get things worked out, and we didn't know none of the stuff had been worked out about like who owns the results of the intellectual property, or whatever is created by the LLMs.
Yeah.
And because we do stuff on behalf of the federal government, those two questions were paramount to us. So we put we said a policy like, no one at Cognitive, at least on billable project, can use these AI systems. So we sort of locked that down. But at the same time, I started experimenting with it both at work and at home. And so I went through, ChatGPT and Perplexity and Gemini, and was trying all these different things. And then in 2025, my buddy Pete said, "Hey, you really got to try." And so and through that whole process, Pete was like pushing me to do things like, "Hey, just try vibe coding, like build something." Okay, well, I'll build, a video game. I'll try to build a video game, and so I would do it. And so I played around with Cursor and Replit, and things would break, and I'm like, this stuff isn't mature. Like, you're frustrated. It was almost always like some little operating system thing, which it was just a pain, right? So I could fix it, but it would take me like 3 hours to get in there and figure out all the, what thing I hadn't downloaded and what I needed to fix. And it was just like,
But there's like an early promise. Like, you could see, wow,
you could see, yeah,
this could be really cool if
you could tell in the different system, and everything was advancing so quickly. So it was like, I had this problem last week, but if I come back the week later, it's been fixed, or I could ask it to fix itself. So I was playing around with these things, and separately in the background, I've always wanted to have this idea of a life workout partner, and so I have this idea. So I'm a
like another spouse.
I would not go down that direction. Different than a spouse.
Okay.
So,
all right.
So back in my high school and college days, I used to work out in the gym, and I work out with a bunch of buddies, mostly guys, and like we would, these are my workout partners. You get together, get in the gym, trash talk each other. You'd always have a certain time you show up, and those guys held me accountable, and I held them accountable to like meeting goals and showing up. And you didn't want to not show up, otherwise you'd be further trash talked, or whatever, right? And you had this like camaraderie around holding each other accountable and challenging each other to go to the next level. That was great, and I've always wanted that for other areas of my life. And I've always wanted a group of friends or colleagues who would be sort of my, what I would call, life workout partner.
So people would trash talk you at your job and be like, "You really suck at being
really
CEO of this company that you started."
Why have you been here? Like, what are you doing with this company? Like,
you know what?
Change careers.
Your driving sucks, Doug. I'm here to tell you,
Yeah,
you're such a better driver.
This is my role. This is what I do for Eric. I just
exactly.
I look at his work and say, not good enough yet. Keep going.
Keep going.
Well, Mike and I do go running every Sunday, and I think I would not have done it. We've done it for years. I would not have done it without having a buddy to keep me accountable.
I've always wanted, with colleagues and friends, to have sort of a life workout partner across more than just the gym domain. And I've never been able to find any one individual or groups of individuals that really could do it more than in like two life domains. And life domains would be like, work and family and religion or spirituality and, whatever, parenting, raising kids, sort of all that stuff, romance. And I've been able to find people that could do it in like two domains, but really not more than two domains, which makes sense. Like, I mean, unique individual, all unique individuals, and everyone tracks goals differently, and everyone's motivated by different things. So it's going to be hard to find those people.
So it sounds like your focus when you're seeking this out is it's goals based, it's performance based. Is that right? Is that like
Yep.
that's what you're kind of looking for? Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Keeping you accountable, pushing you to the next level, and then being there, when things don't go according to plan, or you got to, sort of refactor or whatever, right? Which is, all of life. So I've always been looking for this, separate from AIs and LLMs. Always been looking for this like life workout partner across like 10 different domains. In addition, with technology, on and off through my career, I've had executive assistants in the roles that I'm in. And I love the idea of an executive assistant or an executive officer, as they call in the military, someone who sort of knows you inside and out and can act on your behalf in whatever role. If you're not there, they can take action. You can give them things and they'll do things, they'll do, schedule this meeting, figure out, when I'm next going to Washington, D.C. or whatever, like set up my week. And the really good executive assistants I've worked with are really like a bolt-on brain. Like they remember things, you can give them things, they just figure it out. And
they anticipate probably.
They anticipate, they predict. Yep, exactly. So when I started playing with these LLMs, I started thinking like, okay, well, maybe these LLMs are going to get to the place where I could have both of those things, like a personal digital assistant and a life workout partner in these 10 different domains. And I started playing around with Perplexity, I think in 2024, 2025, and then Google Gemini. I was hopeful about Google Gemini because most of my personal life ecosystem is in the Google domain, so Google Drive, Gmail, YouTube Music, those sorts of things. So I thought, okay, well, if Gemini could do it, then all this stuff should be connected and it should be easier to solve. Really, Gemini couldn't do it, at least at the time. And, I've got a Google mobile phone Pixel, the latest Pixel. They got AI chips and everything in there. So like big promise, but I wasn't able to find the one. So I played around in each of those different, with ChatGPT, OpenAI. And each of these I was buying, the sort of license model, the sort of medium to high end license model. But none of them were really could do as much as I needed it to do at the time. So there was a lot of promise, but it was still falling short.
So what kind of environment were you working in at this point in time? Were you just working with chat, or was there something like Claude Code that you could build tools inside of? Or
I mean, so for the vibe coding stuff I was using Cursor and Replit. That wasn't really around the creating of the digital assistant side. That was just sort of playing around, like, could I actually make a piece of software without actually writing a line of code? I proved that out to work, and that I got that to work. But the other experiments I was doing really more around a digital assistant were really in the chat interfaces. Like Perplexity had Spaces, and Gemini has Gems, I think. So they're in the sort of persistent chat plus interfaces where we could do stuff. It would have some aspect of memory. You could build Claude Code called some skills, but essentially skills are like advanced macros and those sorts of things. So that was where I was starting to prototype the assistant kind of stuff.
And did you find memory to be a problem? Because you might get it to do a thing that impressed you, but then you lose your session, you start a new session, it's all gone. How did you deal with that?
I didn't really, but it was definitely a problem. So like the first thing I really wanted to do was to create this global risk dashboard. So it was kind of a test across the different LLMs. Create a dashboard that you present to me every morning, and the dashboard should be in the same user interface. And think about sort of like a Bloomberg terminal user interface. Create sort of a Bloomberg terminal user interface of the major things that have happened geopolitically and the major financial market moves over the last 24 hours. And present that to me in a summarized format and give me a undefined, and I want you, the LLM, to define it, global risk score. And the global risk score is at 0, the world is perfectly safe and perfectly predictable. And at 100, it's anarchy and chaos and on the verge of destruction. So I purposely left
I'm
it
afraid to guess what kind of numbers you usually get out of this thing.
pretty high across all of them. It was consistently above 60.
Okay.
Um, I purposely left it undefined because I wanted the AI to define it for me, and then
Mm,
to be consistently defined. So across and I was using Perplexity across the OpenAI models, and the Claude models. I was using the OpenAI models, and then I was using the Gemini models, and none of them, including Gemini, which yeah, obviously, or maybe not obviously, but has Nano Banana and all that, has a really good graphics rendering engine. Really, none of them could consistently produce the same user interface output every day, and so part of that
mm,
was the memory issue. So
mhm.
every day would be wildly different, even if it's the same information. Um, and some of them rejected the idea of creating this global risk score on their
Oh,
own.
okay.
Like
Yeah,
OpenAI,
right.
like, nope, we can't do it. That's too undefined. Like,
Hmm.
okay, well, take a shot at it, try. And so that was, it's a long way away from being a personal decision, but that was sort of my litmus test across the AIs. And I could play around with it, and so memory was a problem there because it wouldn't do the same thing every single day.
Hmm.
And then in late 2025, my buddy Pete said, "Hey, you really got to look at Claude Code and start playing with Claude Code." So I started playing around with Claude Code, but I didn't really have the time to do it. Then I took the sabbatical, and in mid-December 2025, one of my goals during the sabbatical is to go deep on Claude Code. And so early in the sabbatical, I ran this same global risk dashboard test with Claude Code, and Claude Code did it really, really well. Same format every day. It wasn't afraid of defining its own risk score, and it didn't have the infographic thing that you can get out of Nano Banana, but it had a spreadsheet format that was the same every day.
It was consistent every day, different
It was.
sessions.
Yeah.
That's
So
surprising.
so the risk score would change every day. So that's what I wanted to do. But the format output was the same every single day.
Did it explain the risk score, or did it just give you an arbitrary number and say, trust us?
It explains the risk score. It's like this is the risk score because of these 6 different things, or 10 different things. So I was encouraged by Claude Code, but also intimidated by Claude Code. Just by the name of it, Claude Code makes me think I'm going to have to be doing software programming at the
Coding.
keyboard, code
Oh,
at the CLI level.
interesting.
And so I said, so one of the goals was I'm going to go deep on Cloud Code. I'm going to spend 30 days. I'm going to learn this. And then I'm going to be better prepared to come back to cognitive when my sabbatical was over and sort of, here's where we're going with AI. Here's where I think we should go. The
Mhm.
other thing that had happened in 2025 is that we started to see service offerings of companies like Windsurf, who had finally, so a lot of the stuff had been adjudicated in the courts about who owns the intellectual property, or started to be adjudicated. So that was one question that was being solved. And you could now keep your data you could opt out of training the models. So that was another big piece for doing work in DoD and VA. But the third, probably most important piece, was that companies like Windsurf were now offering the different model capabilities in either the GCC High Cloud at Microsoft, the Azure Cloud, or the AWS Gov Cloud.
Yeah, so it's
So
like
we
a
were
unified interface, but you can pick your
exactly,
model. Yeah,
and you
got it.
could once you had the Gov Cloud, then you could assure that they were being done on U.S. servers, and that solved that whole FedRAMP or FISMA issue. So
Interesting.
that was happening
Interesting.
as well. So I knew coming back from the sabbatical, I needed to have a real position on what we were going to do at cognitive with AI. So diving deep into Claude Code made sense.
As a
But
leader of a
then
company, were you afraid that your people who work for you, who are working on software, they're just going to go use the things anyway,
we
and you need
knew
to really
we
put
we
guardrails on
knew
it?
they were, yeah, we knew everyone, yeah, it was like we knew they were doing it. We just had to have the official policy that you can't use that for building software for
Mm,
Department of Veterans Affairs. And so that was all fine, and we were encouraging people to play around with it on their own time. And we just needed the industry to catch up to the place where we could actually use these tools. So I had this 30-day goal. So in January, I went and said I had the 30-day goal, but don't want to deal with all these operating system issues, and like it's going to spend all my time dealing with configuration stuff and getting the tools to work. So I went to Reddit and I asked in the Claude Code subreddit, I'd like, hey, here's what I got 30 days. I want to learn Claude Code. I don't want to deal with all the the operating system stuff and configuration stuff. I need like a wingman or wing woman that I could pay as a consultant to help me work through this and teach me Claude Code in 30 days.
Mm.
And like 5 people responded on Reddit. It's like, you don't need a consultant. You just
Yeah.
need to ask Claude Code to develop the 30-day training program, and
Yeah.
it will walk you through the whole thing. I'm like, okay, that's smart. So I did that, and it did it. And I started on day one, and every day it had a PowerPoint presentation and a whole bunch of things to walk through. And I spent an hour a day. And by day 15, I was writing my own software, or having Claude Code write my own software and rewrite the tools, some of the tools I had been using, just stuff I was licensing, like to-do lists and stuff like that. And at day 15, I then changed the training program and said, okay, I want you to build my personal digital assistant,
Oh, interesting.
Sam, or I want to start building this. Here's the vision for it. And by that point, I had built up, I was building skills. The other thing I should say is that also what happened with Anthropic early in January, maybe late in December, was they released Claude Code Cowork, which was the
Okay. Okay.
user interface, the GUI aspect to Claude Code that allowed you to not use the CLI, and that's what I started with, the
Is it?
Cowork.
I might have a little bit of expert's blindness here, Doug, and I don't mean this. I think it's like it's hard for me to see what training you would need to use the tool. But are you talking just like CLI commands and stuff like that? Is
It's
that like it's hard
uh,
for me to even imagine that
yeah,
there's any skill? And I'm
yeah,
not trying to denigrate that at all.
no, 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 no.
It's invisible to me
No,
that there's a
exactly.
skill.
Which is interesting, because I think a lot of people in the industry are not technologists, right? They want to get access to this stuff, but they're intimidated by, like, if I'm going to have to use a command line interface,
CLI.
oh yeah, what is
Okay,
that?
all
What does
right,
that
all
mean?
right. So it'll say
So
run this command, and you have no
it
idea what the command is.
well, and yes, so one of the big unlocks for me was the Cowork interface. So I started using the Cowork interface. It was a complete GUI interface, right, as a part of the
Mhm.
Claude Code desktop, and that makes it less intimidating to get started. And so the training program, they built Claude Code would build the Microsoft PowerPoint. I would use the Cowork interface, and then it would say, just run this in the interface, like just ask it to do this, or how to build a skill. Like, I want to create a skill that does
Oh,
copies an email to a Google Calendar event or whatever. Like, and so it walked me through how to start building skills. And then at some point on day 5 or whatever, I'm like, so what is the difference between the Cowork interface, the chat interface, and the CLI interface? And then it walked me through that. It's like, oh, just try the CLI, just ask it a question, or and then. And I was like, oh, well, CLI is so much easier. Like, I don't have to deal with all this GUI stuff. And so then I was using almost exclusively the CLI. And then by day 15, I had sort of pivoted, like, okay, well, don't forget the training program. The training program is important, but I've learned enough. Now, let's start building stuff. And that's
building
when I
stuff.
started
Yeah.
building SAM, and making it, not only the personal digital assistant part of it, but also the sort of life coach, or the life, not
I
life
don't know,
coach, life
Doug.
coach,
I mean, I
whatever.
would have probably given you another goal at that day 15, which would have been okay. You're fine in CLI with Claude Code. Let's go to Emacs now. I mean, we need to level this up a little bit.
that,
These are
and
rookie numbers here at CLI. Like, let's go
so
hard.
I
Sorry, that's a
used
bad
to
joke.
no, no, no. I loved Emacs. Emacs was great. I wrote my master's thesis on Emacs and LaTeX. And it was
Oh,
like,
there you go. There you go. All right,
and
so I
so
keep distracting though. So you go to Sam. You built a digital assistant that you call Sam. So
yep,
that's what we're really curious about. You've been spending a lot of time working on this and utilizing this tool. So
yep,
that's what I think what we're getting to here. Can you tell us
yep,
about that
exactly.
tool now?
Yeah, absolutely. So SAM stands for Samantha, sort of a combination in terms of personality of the Samantha from the movie Her, and Ava from the movie Ex Machina, both of which didn't end well for the humans, as many people have pointed out. But I like those two movies, and I like those sort of personalities, and I like the edginess of both of those. Like, okay, I got to stay on top of this. I got, this person's gonna outwit me. It's gonna, I'm gonna be its digital slave at some point. I completely believe. But that's kind of what I was looking for, and I was looking for something Sam. It could be male or female. It didn't matter, or whatever. So
Hmm.
that was the idea there, and the idea is going to be, ultimately, it was going to be my personal AI digital assistant and my life workout partner, and it really
Okay.
needed to do both things.
What you really
So
wanted. So you're
yeah,
trying to get to
exactly,
that.
exactly.
Yeah.
And in the next couple of years, I'm going to retire. I'm not going to have an executive assistant, so I'm going to need, at least I want something that'll be able to do this day-to-day admin stuff, because I'm I'm sure I'm going to be just as busy in retirement as I am in the day-to-day
You
work
can't
work
just,
world.
you're going to use it to schedule your crocheting time and your retirement
Exactly.
years.
Workshop, time with kids, like everything's going to go through Sam.
So I understand that you also introduced OpenClaw at some point in time and
Hmm.
actually bought a Mac Mini.
That's true. That's true. So the OpenClaw thing had started in what, mid-December 2020, 2025, mid-December 2025. My buddy Pete said, "Hey, you got to look at this OpenClaw thing that's happening as well, in addition to Claude Code, and everyone's buying these Mac Minis." So when I got into the Claude Code in January, I started asking Pete more questions like, okay, so what is OpenClaw and how does OpenClaw relate to Claude Code? One of the things I liked about OpenClaw was that it was independent of the model and the tooling underneath it. So if Claude Code didn't work out, maybe I could implement OpenClaw and then I could swap in, OpenAI or whatever.
Gemini
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Claude, right? Exactly. Yeah.
So almost in the first week of learning Claude Code, I'm like, okay, this is going to be really good, and I think I can finally start building something here. So I gave it a task to plan for implementing OpenClaw, and asked it, okay, so if we're building this digital assistant called Sam, this life coach, and I want to do it with OpenClaw and Claude Code, and this whole idea of this Mac Mini, what do I need to do to put all that together? And so
Mhm.
it came up with a plan. It spec'd out a Mac Mini. I think I hit it uh, just at the right, accidentally at the right place before the
Before they
entire
sold
rest of the
out.
world, or yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So I got
What are
in
the
there. I got a
what are the
Mac
specs
Mini.
on the machine you end up getting?
I can't remember. It's one of the higher end Mac Minis.
So it's got a lot. How
So
much memory do you think it has? That's what I'm
I think
curious about.
it's like 48 gigs of memory.
Oh, okay, okay.
Something like that. Yeah, I went with the highest, maybe not the highest end, but the pretty high end. The other idea I liked about the Mac Mini, so with Cognitive, we're a completely virtual company now, but it turns out you need to have some physical office space for the U.S. government to be a government contractor. So we have a Regis executive office space here in San Diego with like 100 square feet, and so I'm like, oh, okay, well, the other thing that worries me about all this is like, okay, how much information do I give it? And, is it going to, like, I was hearing all the OpenClaw security vulnerabilities and all that. So,
Yeah,
okay,
hundreds of CVEs
yeah,
reported on that project, and normally I'm like, I'm not
yep,
gonna really run it
exactly.
myself.
So I liked the idea of being able to isolate this, and I'll talk more about how I structured it with Dropbox, and I isolate just a subset of my information in a dedicated Mac Mini that I could keep in this physical office space, which is the Regis office space, away from my home network. Um, and so I went out and I had it spec that. I bought a Mac Mini, and then 3 weeks later it came, and then I started the process of setting up OpenClaw. All of that was sort of happening in parallel to what I was building with Sam and the workout partner and the personal digital assistant side of the equation.
Mm-hmm. So that's where it gets to the question that I was really wondering. Like when people start describing a thing that they've built, I have to have the pieces in my head. What are the
Yep.
pieces of this
Okay.
SAM digital assistant thing?
Yeah, exactly. One of the first things I did was, and one of the things I had wrestled with over the last couple of years is like, okay, so ultimately, if I want to get to the place where I've got a personal digital assistant, how does it know me? Like what are the minimum amount of things that I can give it so that it knows who I am and my personality? So I'm a pretty fastidious, keeper of information. So I've got, 30 years of goal tracking spreadsheets. I've got,
Wow.
electronic healthcare record information. I track everything. I track, I've got watches and rings and all this stuff to track the physical fitness stuff.
Wow.
I've
Okay.
got,
Yeah. Data rich environment.
data rich, exactly. But I don't want to give it yet access to my entire Google Drive.
Mm.
And so I came up with this idea of the quintessence of me, and what are the minimum set of documents that I could give the AI so that it would know who I was. And so I created things like resumes and electronic healthcare record information and goal tracking, all my goal spreadsheets. Being in sales and marketing, I've taken probably hundreds of personality tests, like Myers-Briggs and all that kind of stuff. I got all that information. I've worked with lots of executive assistants, so I've got like here's how to work with Doug,
Hmm.
as I get a new executive. So I've got lots of that information. So I came up with like, I don't know, 50 documents that are what I call the quintessence documents. And so the way I started this whole thing is I created a Dropbox, and I use Dropbox and Google Drive and a bunch of other, but Dropbox is sort of persistent across work and home, where Google Drive is just at home and Microsoft OneDrive is at work. Um, and so Dropbox is kind of the glue. So I created a Dropbox folder. I dropped in the quintessence files, and I gave Claude Code access to just that folder. So I have a folder in Dropbox called Claude Code Cowork that contains all of my Claude Code information. And that's the place that it works in the working directory. And that's where I started, it started building the training program, and I would do my exercises, and the stuff would live in that directory. And
Hmm.
and then I started building skills, on like day 1 or day 2, which you guys know are just, automated routines, like, sort of macros plus 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 inside
Hmm.
of Claude to do simple stuff. And those skills build on top of each other.
Do you have an example? Like you said, simple stuff. Like what kind of skills maybe?
Like one of the skills is, so I travel a lot for work. So one of the skills is when a airline reservation ends up in an email, take the details of that airline information and put it into my calendar
Got it. Okay,
exactly
got
the
it.
way I want it. Right. So
Yeah, got it. Okay. All right. All
things
right.
you
So and
can
then skills,
do, yeah,
you
simple
said it's
stuff.
skills build on each other. That's where you were
Yep.
going with it. Yeah.
Yep,
So,
exactly, exactly. Check one of the skills is check the health status of the Mac Mini in the office and all the web services and everything that, sort of like typical kind of monitoring. And one of the other things I did during the sabbatical as it related to this stuff is I started thinking about what do I do every single day, and
hmm.
started keeping a list of what do I do every single day. And if I do something more than twice in a given day, I should make a skill for that if it can be
Wow.
automated. So
Jeez.
so if I do something more than twice, it should have a skill. I'm a long way from that being the case, but that's one of the things I started
Right, because I
tracking.
drink
Right?
a lot of coffee. I make
Yeah.
more than 2 cups of coffee. I go to the bathroom a few times. There's a lot of skills that I could
Outsource
potentially
that
be
to
making.
AI.
That's a bad joke too.
It can do
So
it
now you have
all.
these skills, and what are are you seeing the picture at this point? Or are you just sort of
Yeah,
cobbling it together? Like,
I'm
okay,
cobbling it together. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm cobbling it together. And but I'm seeing the picture, and I'm optimistic about the picture. So then, day 15 or so, I'm a religious tracker of things like in terms of to-do lists. And so I've used, every sort of tracking note-taking system, to-do
yeah,
list
right.
system or whatever.
Obsidian notes, stuff like
Yeah,
that. Yeah,
yeah,
right. Got it. Yeah.
exactly. Evernote, whatever. So I was using a system called Simple Note, which I liked because it worked across all, and I'm a multi-platform. I've got a Android phone, and we use Mac at work. I use PCs at home. Like, it's got to work everywhere. So for any of my software, I want a consistent user interface across all of the interfaces. I want it to be web enabled, so it should be
Mm.
able to get to it via the web. And I want it to be available on all these different platforms. So I thought, okay, well, I'll take Simple Note, and let's see how I can connect Simple Note to Claude Code. Simple Note has an MCP server, Model Context Protocol server, and so I implemented my first MCP connection with Claude Code, but the API that Simple Note had wasn't robust enough and wasn't pulling all the information. I'm like, oh, that's a pain, like so. What can I do? I can go to Simple Note. I can put in a request. I'm like, make your API more robust. I'm like, or I could just recreate it. Like I could recreate the note taking system that I've always wanted, and let's do it a test. And so I built this basic set of requirements, and I said, okay, go build this. And an hour later, I had my own note taking system
Wow.
that
Okay.
worked within Cloud Code. I'm like,
All right. All right.
okay. And then I started thinking about like this changes everything in terms of enterprise software. There's a lot of like everyone's talking about, okay, well, like Salesforce way overvalued, like short the stock. I don't think any of that's happening. But in terms of thinking about how we build software and the fact that a lot of users can build a software that works for them and has just the features that they need and
Hmm.
all of the features that they need, that is pretty powerful.
One thing I had heard from listening to Andrew Karpathy is that he discovered that, he has all these services in his house. He's got Sono, and he's got a doorbell camera, and he's got things that heat his pool up or whatever. And all of them have a separate app.
Yep.
And he's, he was saying that all these apps are kind of pointless now. I don't want to have a separate app for all of these
Yep.
things. I just want them to talk to my, my OpenClaw or whatever
Yep.
agent I'm using. And so I'm wondering if you've had this experience too, and if you think that's the way the industry is going, where now people really want to make their software friendly to these AI environments.
I do think it. I have had the experience, and the second piece of software I built was the physical fitness tracking. So I use all these different devices, right? And they all have different apps and APIs, and none of them work well. And Google has something called Google Fit, which ties a bunch of them together. But now Google's getting rid of Google Fit, and so I thought, okay, I want to get all this stuff into a consistent user interface. So the next piece of software I built beyond the note-taking app was the fitness tracking app, like pull in all these APIs, all this device data, just go directly. If they have an API, go directly to the API. If they don't have an API, scrape it off the screen and present it in the user interface that I want, synchronize it when I want it to be synchronized, and add goal tracking to that. So have I done my 10,000 steps? Have I drank my 100 ounces of water a day? Sort of like put my goals into this interface in the way that I want it to be designed. So I think that's where things are going, Mike.
But your life workout partners just sort of independently show up at the gym and go, Doug, you weren't here. Is that, that's what you want ultimately with this tool?
Yeah.
Like, you don't want to have to fire up the chat session and be like, let's run through you want it to be just independently. It sounds like it's got to be like a daemon. It's got to run somewhere. It's going to be sending you text messages and emails. Like, Doug, why are you at a movie right now? You're supposed to be working out.
Exactly. Ultimately, that's what
is that what you're looking for? That's what you built.
That's what I'm building. I don't want to get too far ahead of it. Yeah,
that's the road you're on.
But that's what I'm looking for. One of the things I wanted to, so my wife and many other people think this is crazy and like I already have enough stress in my life. Why am I adding this other piece of stress in my life? One of the things I tried with Gemini in my early sort of prototyping of this stuff is I had it take on a personality of a drill sergeant. So okay, ramp it up. Really, I want you to you're not worthy enough. Every day.
Okay, all right.
That was too much. I didn't want that. But I have kept personality mostly out of SAM so far. It's got really a neutral personality. It's got a bot interface in the Discord, sort of universe, which is one of the ways I can chat with it and have it connect to other bots. My buddy Pete, who's doing the same thing with different goals, and his bot has a lot of personality. He's injected a lot of personality. My bot doesn't really have much personality yet. So I've been trying to keep personality out of it and just sort of have it be neutral and have it challenge me and keep me accountable for the goals that I'm setting by checking in every day or multiple times a day.
So you just mentioned Discord bot. So you describe the Mac Mini. So you've got something running on the Mac Mini. It's listening on these Discord channels for particular bot invocation.
Midway through January, I got the Mac Mini. I implemented OpenClaw. OpenClaw was interesting because it had more of an agent architecture, and you could it came with a bunch of connectors. You could do a bunch of things. But I had already built up a lot of what SAM is on top of Claude code, in the form of skills and started to build software. So I had, the note application. I had this health tracking application. I have a shopping list application that both me and my wife use. And I've got a real estate tracking. We're looking for buying a piece of investment property in San Diego. And you guys know, the MLS is just crap, and it's it's horrible. And so we're working with a real estate agent. And I'm I need to get this in. I need to get cap rates. And
Don't you just have an API? What's going on here?
API, just give me access to the MLS.
Yeah.
And through that process, I'm I'm just going to build a piece of software. So now feeling more emboldened with Cloud Code, just build a piece of software. And I showed it to my real estate agent. He's like, yeah, this is sort of the value that I add to doing all this stuff. I'm I understand. I still need you, but
You're
need
automating me away.
A lot more
Doug.
analysis. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I need a lot more analysis. So I built these 4 pieces of software, and I'm starting to use it, and I'm having it track goals, sort of daily goals, weekly goals, monthly goals, yearly goals, which was already doing in spreadsheets, and then having it do the daily dashboard and global risk analysis and sort of start preparing this set of things and these check-ins. And so now I got the Mac Mini. So Claude Code's running on the Mac Mini. I implement OpenClaw. OpenClaw is running on top of Claude Code in the Mac Mini. I'm not
Okay.
doing much yet with OpenClaw, but one of the first things I did was set up Tailscale, which provides sort of easy VPN across all these different devices and home. And then I connected my OpenClaw via Tailscale to my buddy Pete's OpenClaw, who was, he had done the same thing. So a lot of what I was learning and thinking about was coming from him and his experience. And then we wanted to have bots. So we wanted to be able to, so how do you interact with this whole thing, right? So you can be in front of a computer and work either at the CLI. Now it's working almost exclusively at the CLI level. You can work at the CLI level. You can work at Claude Code Desktop. In Claude Code Desktop, you could do co-work, or you can do the chat interface, or you can do
you send messages in. Where are they going? What's processing them? You want your bot to fight Pete's bot. How do we make that happen?
Yeah, exactly. But all of that requires you to be in front of a computer, right? The mobile interfaces that they've got are really still just the chat interface for the mobile application, for the Claude mobile.
And it goes straight to the cloud, right? You want it to work inside your tooling, your setup.
Exactly. Yeah. So I've got Dropbox set across these things. So on a given day, I've got a PC and a Mac at home. I've got my work PC. I've got the Mac Mini. I've got a work PC in the office that I use for traveling. And so I've got, well, not the work stuff, but on all the home computers, I've got Dropbox running and synchronized. I've got Claude Code at the CLI level running on terminal instances and all these devices. They're all using, and so this starts to come into where memory is important. They're all using Dropbox and shared memory files, and I've got a synchronization program that runs, many times through the day that updates the memory, writes the context of whatever I was working on, and I've got project files for all these different projects I'm doing. I've got a project backlog that tracks all this stuff.
Wow.
So we wanted to get the bots. So one of the ways to interact with OpenClaw or Claude Code is via a bot in one of the messaging platforms. The messaging platforms that are typically supported or that have been supported are like WhatsApp, Discord, Telegram, one other one. I'm not a WhatsApp user. I'm a Signal user, but Signal is sort of designed not to be persistent and trackable for other reasons because they were founded by the guys that did WhatsApp. So most of my messaging stuff happens across Signal. So we decided to try Telegram. So we implemented our bots on Telegram.
That's useful because your wife speaks Russian. It's real popular. Sorry, you don't need Russian to use Telegram, sounds like. You could just use Telegram.
My wife is like, what are you doing? She's not on board with all this stuff. And so we tried it in Telegram, but Telegram really wasn't designed for a bot infrastructure. So it was very hard to get these two bots to talk to each other, or not hard to get them to talk to each other. It was hard to get them to talk to each other intelligently.
And consistently, the formatting's all weird.
Maybe and the memory and all that kind of stuff. So we abandoned that after about 3 weeks, and we went to Discord because Discord, and I didn't realize this. I mean, I realized that what Discord was, and it evolved around the video game culture. But Discord evolved around running groups of people or managing groups of people, World of Warcraft, guilds and that sort of stuff. It evolved to be able to have the software do things that the humans didn't want to do, like invite people and uninvite people and whatever. So it evolved natively as a bot-like infrastructure. And so they are sort of bot first in terms of the messaging platforms.
Okay, so Discord's the easiest place to get this all working.
Discord was the easiest place to get the bots all working.
So now, then if it works, you can be like, hey, my Claude Code bot, I want you to convince Pete's bot to order 400 gallons of water and ship it to his house.
Yeah, exactly.
You do stuff like that.
And all the guardrails around all that, like what can our bots do? And you don't want a bot storm, right? You don't want them going back and forth
Right, recursively talking to each other forever.
That sounds problematic. Using tokens and all of that was happening, and sort of learning more about how all this stuff works. I wasn't really using, like a lot of people approach Claude Code from the OpenClaw side of things, and they implemented OpenClaw, and that's how they started using Claude Code. I started the other way around. So I wasn't really using a lot of stuff in OpenClaw. And then I think it was like mid-March, Anthropic changed their pricing model, seeing what was happening, right? Changed their pricing model so that every time you hit OpenClaw, you hit the Claude Code API, which is not, as a part of your subscription. So that's a different subscription, right? And I had that subscription because the other thing I had done along the way is I implemented voice on top of all this stuff.
Oh,
Because while it's useful, like if I'm in front of my computer all day long, that's fine, but I'm not. I travel a lot. I'm in the car a lot. So I need a voice interface to this. And I'd long been intrigued by what Gemini was doing and the personal assistants on the Google Pixel phones and those sorts of things, but it didn't work very well. So I implemented, and this is like with Claude Code, but in parallel, I implemented the voice API with Twilio,
Twilio.
And a voice aspect to Sam that allows me to call Sam and talk to Sam and do a number of things like, hey, send an email, make a reservation at a restaurant. What's my drive time right now? A lot of the stuff you can do with Gemini or Siri or whatever, but it's the stuff you do on those is not tied into your ecosystem. And all the stuff I'm doing with Sam at the voice level is tied into the memory infrastructure. And when I
He needs
say
he needs to go somewhere that
call,
has access to Dropbox that
yeah,
can read the
exactly,
stuff and kick off the commands.
exactly. So OpenClaw was useful for getting the voice stuff working, but it started to get expensive when Anthropic changed the pricing model, and I wasn't really using. And at the same time, Anthropic, an extremely aggressive company, was replicating feature by feature the stuff that OpenClaw was doing. So by the
Interesting. Yeah.
time that April came around last month, both Pete and I were like, what? And I was asking Claude Code, like, what can't you do that OpenClaw can do? And it was nothing that I was using.
Okay.
One 3-hour session, I replaced OpenClaw with Claude Code primitives.
Nice move.
You described a lot of what Sam does and how you built it. Could you give us sort of a summary of like a typical day with Sam? Like how do you use it getting up in the morning and going through the day?
I make it sound like it's a personal digital assistant right now, and it has aspects of it. It's not anywhere near a human executive assistant. When I get up in the morning, the first thing that's presented to me is this dashboard of stuff I have to do in the day, the global risk dashboard that's just in a Word document. The health checks it has done the night before on the system health checks. And it also does an idea scan of the community in the world and what people are doing with OpenClaw in this and other domains. So it comes back with 3 ideas that it thinks I might want to consider for the backlog for things to implement. A lot of that stuff recently has been around memory and memory management. One of the things that happened, I think it was early April, is I don't know, Anthropic accidentally released it or someone hacked them or whatever, but their Codex stuff got released.
On April Fool's Day,
yeah, April
Code,
Fool's Day,
yeah.
exactly.
They accidentally published their source maps. They published their source code actually for Claude Code.
Exactly. And my understanding is a lot of that described how they manage memory in Claude Code. And so there's a lot of stuff coming out now about, okay, here's the way to optimize memory management when you're doing stuff in Claude Code. So a lot of that recently has been around that. And my memory system is evolving pretty significantly over the last week or so. But so in a given day, I get up, I turn on the computer, I've got my sort of daily, here's what's planned for me today. What do I need to do? What I need to think about? Here's what happening in the world. Here's what's happening on the health front. Here's my metrics in the last 24 hours. And then it will immediately go, as soon as I interact with Claude Code, it will immediately go into the goal check. So like in any weekday, so I've got the 10 life domains, and any weekday, it will ask me to go deeper on what I've done in 2 of those domains. So like family or being a father or work stuff, it'll ask me to describe what have I done this week as it relates to that. It'll query me back and forth like, okay, well, I don't want to make it sound like this, but like, did you really do that? Like, give me proof that you did that. Like,
does appearing on our show count for any of those life domains, or is that just
it does.
It's just floating.
It's a learning.
It counts as one. Oh, okay, all right.
And so on any given day, it will do those things. It will ask me those things. It'll present the list of stuff that's in the SAM backlog, not the work backlog, cognitive work backlog, but the SAM backlog. Like here's the 50 projects I'm working on.
Jeez.
Are there any that you want to get kicked off this morning? And I've got short, medium, long-term stuff. And there's generally, yeah, like, let's work on this. Like this morning is a good example. I get up, I've had these two website domains. I've got multiple different companies. I've got these two website domains that correspond to two companies that I have that are shell companies that I will do after I retire from Cognitive, that I've never built websites on, and they're not tied to any sort of Google infrastructure in terms of email. And it's just like, I can go do this, but it's just going to take 4 hours of my time to do it. So this morning on the list was these two companies. Go create the websites for these two companies. And I had already transferred the domains and all that stuff. Within an hour, I had websites for both the companies. And so, like, okay, tomorrow I'll wire that up to the Google infrastructure for doing Google Workspace and Gmail and those sorts of things.
Email and stuff like that. Yeah, interesting.
So those are examples of sort of how I do it. And then throughout the day, I execute skills to get things done. And one of the important things is all of this is on the home infrastructure right now. None of this is at work. And at work, we use Office 365 in the GCC high environment. So none of this stuff connects, right? And purposely. But since I've been back to work, I've been pushing the AI initiatives. Now we're doing a bunch of stuff in AI, and we're going to start doing a pilot with Claude Code on a particular project inside of there. So I'm looking forward to being able to implement some of this stuff in Claude Code at work so that in a security approved way, I can connect these two things or import SAM into work, because most of what I do in a 12-hour day in terms of admin stuff is on the work side of the equation.
Jeez, 12-hour day. I got to tell you, Doug, if you came to me, if I worked for you at your company, you came to me and you're like, I want to run OpenClaw in our office, I would be like, I'd be kind of angry. I'd have to figure out how to diplomatically be like, God, I really hate my boss.
Yeah, we're
Doug
not
today.
no one is wanting to run OpenClaw at
I think my diplomatic answer would be like, let's go to the GitHub repo where they track OpenClaw CVEs. Can we start there, Doug?
How much do you actually have to sit down and interact with Sam? Are there scheduled things that it pushes at you that allow you to sort of disassociate from it so you don't have to be sitting in front of it? Like, does it send you emails? Does it send you Discord messages?
Yeah, right now it's mostly sending Discord messages. Part of the reason for doing this website stuff is to get it an email address so I can start interacting with it in email. I would say that most of what it's doing in terms of time-saving efficiency right now is saving the physical time I would need to do this, to do the same skill or execute the same actions that it does in a skill, by having it do it versus me do it. So like the calendar thing is a good example. Like, I've got 10 things in my Gmail right now that all relate to upcoming trips or events or camping or whatever, that what I would typically do is take the reservation information, put it, create a Google event, invite my wife, do all this stuff. And now I can have Sam just do that by looking, here's the email, go do that. So that saves me 15 minutes or whatever. It does interact with me through the day, but it's most of what I'm having it do requires me to interact with Sam or with Claude Code today. Like some of the things that I thought would be easy are not easy, like travel. Like, as you can imagine, I travel about a week a month in DC. Generally, I travel a month, and one of the things that I have my executive assistant do is do my travel. So one of the things that would be naturally replaced with the digital executive assistant, do the travel. It turns out the big companies like Expedia and Sabre don't have open APIs. And so it's very hard to have Claude Code. Well, and this part doesn't work very well yet, but you can have Claude Code run a web browser interface tab or whatever, but it doesn't work very well. It's hard to say, go create a United reservation from San Diego to Washington, D.C. on this date. Give me the lowest price and, whatever. I'm economy plus, so put me in economy plus seating. It's hard to have it do that. Yeah, that stuff hasn't been worked out. So it still requires a lot of my time. Every day gets a little bit better. And as you guys know, the AI companies are every day shipping stuff that's exponentially better than 2 weeks ago.
We just did an episode which was about doing agentic development and using lots of tokens and so forth. And we saw a lot of blog posts and podcasts about people who develop this compulsion to build things. It sounds like you built a lot of things really quick, and I'm wondering if you're like suffering from this AI psychosis that Karpathy talks about, where you just like wake up in the middle of the night and want to make a new thing.
I do. I am, and my wife has used the word addiction several times. It is exciting. It's compelling. It's interesting to me because it's something new to learn, and I can recreate some of the stuff that bugs me as an IT leader manager. And so I am, like I said, I've got probably 50 things in the SAM backlog that are stuff that I want to build, and every day I'm tackling one of those things. Generally one small thing. So yeah, but it is, and yeah, I find myself like, it's time to go to bed. Like just one more thing. And a lot of stuff is like, I've seen my digital future, and when the AIs are making me a slave, what I will be doing is copying and pasting. What I do a lot of is this stupid operating system stuff, like Dropbox stopped working this morning. Like, why did Dropbox start working? Like, copy the error message, put it into Cloud Code, copy it back, and tell me screenshots. Like I copy and paste a tremendous amount of stuff back and forth between Cloud Code and the operating system.
We've also seen, Eric and I have both experienced this thing, as well as friends of ours, where you set up a big plan to build something, and you let it run, and it goes and it goes, and it says you're out of tokens. You come back at 3 p.m. So you can start again, and you get sort of this antsy feeling like, why can't I have more tokens? And I just wondering if you are having issues too with running out of tokens.
I have not. My buddy Pete does, but he's doing, and I imagine you guys are doing much more complex things. I have not run into that issue yet. I'm on the Anthropic Max plan. That what I was running into was this. So the way the Anthropic API stuff works is you give them a credit card and you give them a chunk like $100 or whatever. So when they changed their pricing model, I was like every 2 days running out of that $100 chunk. So like in 2 weeks, I was like, oh, that's a $500 chunk to the API. Like, what is like, and a lot of it was the voice stuff, and every time you hit open, the way they changed it, every time you hit OpenClaw, I wasn't doing much with OpenClaw, but all the voice stuff was going through OpenClaw. So I call Sam, 5 or 10 times a day on the to and from the office. Like, hey, what's on the calendar? Move this around, schedule this. So while we can't do airline reservations or trip sort of stuff, I have got it to the point where it can do meeting confirmations now. And so it can, one of the things I do is like to confirm the meeting. So I'm going to have lunch tomorrow with Fred or whatever at, whatever restaurant, make the reservation at the restaurant. It can do that. And then call Fred and confirm the meeting. And,
did you confirm coming on our show using this tool?
I did not. I should have.
Yeah, you should. The example you just gave of like you hit these systems issues, Dropbox stopped working, you've got an error message, you paste it back in there. And that used to be one of the core ways that I would find that I ended up learning stuff that I wasn't necessarily eager to learn anyway, because I have to like look at the error, Google the error, try to use my own criticality to interpret which parts of the error are relevant to what's going on with me and also what other people are experiencing. Sometimes nobody else has experience. So I just have to just keep trying things and figuring it out and trying things, figuring it out. I would end up learning a lot. And when you say, I just take the error, I paste it in, it tells me what to do, there is a chance, this is a thing that scares me, I'm curious how you feel about this, that I don't learn as much. And maybe I stop remembering stuff. Like maybe my knowledge actually starts to erode over time because I rely on these tools. Do you find that to be a threat that you're concerned about at all?
I'm not concerned about it right now for me, because I'm learning a lot more than I would have otherwise, because I am trying to understand what it's doing. I don't understand 70% of what it's doing when it deals with these operating system things. But I am like, okay, well it harkens back to the sort of sysadmin days. A lot has changed, but there's still a lot of stuff, right? That's similar. And the other thing is that it regularly makes mistakes. And so, I tell a lot of people that, like working with these LLMs, at least for me, is like having an infinite number of PhDs in any given subject you want to find out more about. But the PhD is a 7-year-old child. And it's really, I have a 4-year-old child. It's really very similar to working with my 4-year-old. Like, I don't know, a month ago, it did an RM minus RF on the memory directory. Like,
It
And it's like,
it
it came
it
back in the
suggested that,
Claude
or
Code.
it did
It
that?
did it. It did it. I gave it, I regularly, probably stupidly, run Claude Code with a flag.
YOLO mode.
It's dangerously skip permissions.
Yeah.
Because I like, and one of its favorite phrases is, "Oh, my bad, I shouldn't have done that." I'm like, you're bad. Like, that's something I would do. Like, why did you do that? There's backups and all
Doug,
that kind of stuff.
you seem very lucid, but as I'm talking to you, my risk profile for you is pretty high. Like, you're cool with a lot of You've got
Why?
dangerously skip permissions. You've got open claw. What else you got, Doug?
I'm an entrepreneur, right? It's all about taking risks.
Move fast and break things kind of thing.
That's right.
I have a question that's sort of related and maybe leads into another topic, which is I've been trying to build tools to help me learn certain things. So, I've been trying to learn the lean proof assistant. And by doing so, I am trying to learn a particular branch of mathematics using lean. I don't want it to tell me the answers. I want it to sort of guide me a little bit. And so one of the things I've been trying to do is I've been trying to give it a sense of what I already know. So I think this relates a little bit to your memory system.
Yep.
And what I found is that it's very difficult to convey to the LLM or to the AI in general what you already know, because like I'll say, I want to learn something about this specific thing. What are the prerequisites for that? And it'll say something like, oh, you should probably learn set theory. And I'm like, okay, I took classes in set theory. I think I'm good there. It's hard for it to really zero in on the things that are the direct prerequisites. And so I'm just wondering if the memory system you have is like sufficient for it to discern what you really like and what it can tell you to guide you that's not just repetitive.
I don't think it is yet, but I think it's getting there. It's recording almost everything, all my interactions. Recently implemented this thing that someone had called like dreaming state or whatever, so that when I'm interacting with it throughout the day, it captures those patterns and then makes recommendations the next day about these dream state or fragments of what I'd like. Oh, maybe you should think about doing it this way, or maybe you should think about creating a skill that does this. So I think it's starting to do a little bit of that. I'm also starting to be more comfortable by adding more documents in there beyond the quintessence documents and all the stuff that I've done with it. So at some point, I want to implement RAG and give it more access to my Google Drive.
Interesting.
And that is going to be interesting and a little bit scary. But that my Google Drive really contains my life for the last 40 years or so, and since I'm able to digitize stuff.
So I think when we use this word memory in this context, if for me, I always feel like, okay, but this is a metaphor. What is it a metaphor? It's metaphor for human memory, which obviously is not really analogous. Human memory is, we sort of almost think of it as infinite. It's not infinite, but we think of it as infinite.
Yep.
And LLMs have a much more strict physical limit on the amount of information you can load up at any given time. That's a context limit, right?
Yep.
So then you've got this pretty strict upper bound on what you can feed into it. Combine that with, I imagine you keep mentioning files. So we're talking about maybe a lot of files, maybe a lot of markdown files. And those markdown files sort of are the metaphor for memory. So then the problem becomes find the most relevant ones. That's why you're talking about RAG, right? Find the most relevant files, read only the most relevant snippets. But ultimately, you probably do still end up going off in the wrong direction quite regularly. Does that sound? I mean, that's your struggle. Am I describing it right?
Yeah, I think that's part of the struggle. And for a while, my memory system was just load in everything in that Dropbox directory, the Claude Cowork directory.
It starts getting really big
into memory. But then as the systems become more complex, I'm hitting the context windows, and it takes time. And so now it's got more of like a caching feature where it pulls in, the stuff I was working on yesterday. It's got a memory file and all the sort of active projects. And then it can go deeper as I need to. And it can go deeper at the Discord level. So I can ask it to search memory, and at the voice level.
Okay. So
neither of those things pull in the
memory
context.
In this case is like a constellation of sources of data.
Yeah.
But then there's also the component that Claude Code has its own quote unquote memory. I don't understand that at all. Yesterday, I was doing something similar to Mike, but I don't remember what I was even looking at. And I said, just for context, I've been building these types of systems for the last 15 years, and it responded, "Oh, I'm going to save something in my memory about you." And my immediate reaction was, "Ew, don't do that. I don't. No, don't do that at all. What are you talking about? Where is this file on my
Where is
machine
it
so I
stored?
could find it and delete it right now?" That was my response.
Yeah.
Do you understand the Claude Code-ish part too? The Claude Code memory part? I don't
No,
get that part.
I don't. And with this source code disclosure or whatever, I'm seeing that in the nightly idea scan for the last week, almost all of them have been related to things people are implementing based on and I think Anthropic has come out and done, now that the source code is open, they've said, here's how we organize
Okay.
memory
Oh.
and here's
So
how Claude deals with memory.
this is like an
So
ongoing problem,
I
I
think it's
think,
an
that people are
ongoing thing.
going to keep working.
I don't understand how it all works, but I am implementing ideas that seem to make sense about how to make the memory more efficient. One of the
Mhm.
big challenges in the bot infrastructure is getting the bot to read more than just the last text message of
Yeah.
memory, right? Like save the text exchange for the last 24 hours and then read that in before you reply.
Well, and the papers I've read seem to indicate that the LLMs are going to prioritize information at the very beginning and the very end, and there's a lot of stuff in the middle that just gets kind of washed out or filtered out. Have you also seen differences as you've switched models? As you go from Opus 4.6 to Opus 4.6, something like, I mean, I don't know what models you're using, but it sounds like
Yeah,
Anthropic
yeah, yeah.
models.
Yeah, I have not, but again, I'm not. I don't think I'm pushing the edge of what this stuff can do at all. I think all of my stuff is pretty easy computationally. I am using Haiku for the voice stuff because the voice stuff doesn't, which is like what 3 models ago or something like that. The voice stuff doesn't require that much computation, and it can do it with the Haiku model, and it's not as expensive. So I'm starting to think about that aspect, and I'm not using the whatever it is Opus 4.7. I'm using 4.6 or whatever the
Got it. Okay, got it.
one behind.
Hmm.
And I haven't knowingly run into any challenges with those, but
So I don't think I'm quite as type A as you. I do have the workout goals, mostly because I'm an old man and I figure that's
I'm with you, buddy.
I'm probably all the way on the other end of the spectrum. I don't have any goals. I'm not even joking. I have no goals.
That's okay.
But those sorts of things, like I run 4 days a week and I go lift 2 days a week, and I can see how I would put those in terms of goals and progress and so forth. And maybe I want to run a race in 6 months, and what are the things I need to do for that. But I'm curious how the other aspects of the workout partner idea work for these somewhat more
Subjective, less
subjective.
trackable.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's always been a problem for me, right? In the goal tracking, kind of nomenclature, you want SMART goals, right? I don't even know what the acronym stands for. Measurable, actionable, but right, you should set your goals so you can measure them, and they're not these subjective things. Well, and I use a spreadsheet that has evolved over the many years to track these things. But most of them are, let's say 50-50 are objectively measurable and subjective goals. So like, did I hit the goal or did it, so like, give you an example, like my older son, Will, is very into heavy metal and he wants to go to lots of heavy metal shows. So one of the goals for this year is to go to 3 heavy metal shows with Will. That's measurable, actionable. One of the other goals with
It's very
Nadia,
metal to put it in a goal form like that.
exactly. With my younger daughter, Nadia, one of the things that I've been working on is to try to be less time bound with her, like try to be less focused on time, because my life, as you can imagine, being type A, runs on a schedule.
Mm-hmm.
4-year-old doesn't run on any schedule, so I get frustrated. Like, we gotta leave the house now. Like, no. So one of my goals is to try to be a better father by being less time focused and restricted with Nadia. That's largely subjective, right? So what I typically do with those spreadsheets is just ask myself, like, realistically, was I less time focused last month than I am this month, or than I was in the previous months? And so what I'm having Claude Code do in tracking me is ask the same sorts of questions, and give it the freedom to use its intelligence to ask related questions around that. So they're not just questions I'm feeding it. It's like, so how would you keep me accountable for a subjective goal, Claude Code? It's doing a pretty good job. I think probably most of what it's doing, because I've set it up that way, is asking me the questions multiple times a week, so that it stays front and center.
So one question could be, hey, Doug, were you less goal-oriented today when you were hanging out with your family? One of your goals
Exactly.
may be to be less goal-oriented in this context.
How many hours did you log on Claude Code in the last 24 hours?
Does it ever just come up and say, "Hey, dude, it's Saturday. Maybe you should just chill"?
It does. It does. Like it's surprising, but I am like, hey, we got this. Like this morning, we got this. 2 websites built off the backlog. Do you want to start the Google Gmail
Domain
stuff,
G Suite.
the workspace stuff, or do you want to call it a day and go spend time with your family? I'm like, let's why don't create the plan. Like, I think you should call it a day and go spend time with your family. Like, Sam, good for you. That's the right answer.
Well, it's really interesting hearing about this, Doug. It's fascinating that you have put a lot of time and effort into building this thing that is like it's a long-term assistant that you've always wanted, like that you're working on a thing you've always wanted. There's a little bit of inspiration in there for me with that.
Yeah. It's been a lot of fun. It's a tremendous learning. I think of it as sort of a hobby, but it's been a tremendous learning adventure, and I'm humbled every day about how advanced these things are, and at the same time, how boneheaded they are. My bad. What do you mean you're bad? You're supposed to be smarter than this. But that keeps me engaged as well. So back to your question about okay, well, why did that go wrong? Like, okay, remember 3 weeks ago you did the stupid thing of deleting the memory. Don't do that again.
Jeez, YOLO mode, Doug. RMRF, whatever you want, Claude Code. Did you have any questions for us, Doug? Anything you want us to?
What are you guys listening in music? What's going on in the music scene?
I keep listening to this Bella White musician I just discovered by a Spotify, and my wife hates it, but it's like country, Americana, folkish type of singer, and I just keep listening over and over to these last few records she put out.
I've been listening to possibly one of the strangest albums I've come across in the 2020s, maybe.
That's a bold one. Okay. What is that?
It's a classical concept album. It's an imaginary requiem for Charles V of Spain, who died in the 16th century. It's called Bomba Flamenca. It's probably not for everyone.
Most of Mike's picks start that way, Doug. It's probably not for everyone.
It's mostly choral music, and a lot of it is sacred music from that era. But it starts off just ridiculously, and it's just such a weird concept that somebody would make up a requiem for somebody. I don't know. I enjoy the idea, but also the music is just very good. And I keep trying to convince myself that it's not just like a classical version of Viking metal or something like that. But
I love that.
What about you, Doug? You listened to anything interesting lately?
In terms of my son Will, we went and saw a guy named who calls himself Buckethead on the metal scene. Have you heard of this guy? The Kentucky Fried Chicken bucket on his head. We saw that in January. It was really, I'd never heard of him before. It was really, really good. We're trying to go see maybe Iron Maiden at the end of the summer, which is an interesting, like what I was listening to in high school and my son is now listening to.
Wow, that's interesting.
In terms of just this week, Jack White came out with a couple new songs in the last couple of weeks that are I found really good, nice and upbeat. And I think Death Cab for Cutie came out with a song.
Oh, wow.
So that's this week.
Well, Doug, thanks so much for hanging out with us. Taking time out
Absolutely.
of your schedule and telling us about your digital assistant, Sam. It was awesome to have you on the show.
This was fun. Yeah.
Thank you
Yeah, I had
guys.
a
Really
great
appreciate
time.
it.
Yeah,
That's
thanks
great.
so much. So this has been Picture Me Coding with Eric Gaker and Mike Mull. We will see you again in a couple weeks.
Thanks, guys.